We are back, everybody, for the Gazette Radio Hour with Doug and John, with Chris Burke filling in for John this week on Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM-1220 KHTS. And I think we have would you call him special?
I would call him special. If he's listening, I'm calling him special.
You better call him special.
We are talking to Mr. Chris Janice of the Gale and Rice Company. Chris, how are you today? I'm Doug, and I think you already know
Doug.
this guy,
Great.
Chris.
Thank you.
My first question is, it's a very serious question. How long have you known this guy, and how is he to work with?
Wow. The first one's easy.
What's your next question?
For 20-plus years, I'm going to assume. How is he to work with? That's an altogether different question, but I will say this, and I think I would say this no matter what. He gets it more than many do. The agency world, and specifically the connection from the agencies to private events, is a tricky thing, and Chris's firm got it before most people, and that was largely done by him. So in that regard, he's great. As a friend, he's a little mediocre.
Wouldn't expect anything less.
All right.
You guys are friends now. When you work together, is there ever any business tension where he irritates you on something, or you guys clash on anything?
Oh, let me answer that.
No, I'm asking Chris.
Okay,
Janice.
I think every day would be the only answer to that.
All right.
You know what? We share a common goal, which is getting the transaction done and making our respective clients happy. And sometimes we kind of have to suck it up and do what we don't want to do in order to get that done.
Well said.
All right. Now listen, he talked me into having you on.
Yeah.
Because he told me if I wanted to have the Eagles play in my backyard, it would be possible.
Yes.
And I told him he's nuts. He said, well, let's have Chris Janice on, and he'll steer you the right way. Is that true? If I wanted to, could I have the Eagles in my backyard? The band, folks, the band, not the birds.
Yeah. I mean, the prevailing question would be, if you have the money, I can get you the band. So it's
okay. That was a short interview.
I mean, yeah. It's a little known thing. I think it's probably a little more prevalent than most people would say. I think with social media and things like that, it's become a little more common for people to know about. But yeah, it's a normal thing, and obviously in the 0.01% of folks that can do it.
But I can also tell you that in the last few years where the economy hasn't been so great, and maybe car companies that would buy entertainment or pharmaceuticals would buy entertainment, and they stopped for a bit because they simply couldn't afford it. Whether they couldn't afford it or it was the perception of not being able to of not wanting to put that out to their people and to their customers. The one kind of thing that stayed going was the Joe, Blow buying an artist in their backyard. I mean, if these guys have money, they had money then, they have it now. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, because what do we always say? If you're rich, you're almost always rich.
Yeah, exactly.
And you tend to not care about the perception too. I mean, Chris's point on the corporate side, even during the worst of the 01 recession and then the meltdown in 08. The reality of that situation was corporations still had money and had it to spend. They just didn't like the perception of the way it looked, especially when it came to something like entertainment. But wealthy individuals that want to create an experience that is unlike any other, it's a real mechanism for them. I mean, it's singular in that regard, that if you have your closest friends in your backyard and you put someone on stage that you normally can only see with 20,000 other people, you create an experience and a situation for that event that is hard to do any other way.
Wow.
And I didn't pick Chris just because we're friends, just so you know, Doug. I picked Chris because he's really the best at what he does. And Chris, I know we're going to go to break in a moment, but real quick, can you shout out some of the artists, and they don't have to all be mine, that you've produced in the last couple of years for individuals?
Yeah, it runs the gamut. Obviously, there's from the highest end, what we try to go for are something kind of a unique experience. We did Van Morrison recently, and he hadn't done a private date in 20 years. We did Prince not too long ago for a client. Same thing, hadn't done a private date in years and years and years. So the fun part is to try and pick those off. Some people don't have that kind of financial appetite, so we do kind of some that are a little more tried and true, and then we try to put them in a setting or a situation that feels kind of unique. But it really runs the gamut. It really does. The budget dictates that 100%.
So okay, we're gonna go to break, and we're gonna come back, and we're gonna talk a little more about who you've worked with in the past in terms of clients that have bought that type of entertainment.
And we're talking to Chris Janice from the Gale and Rice Company on the Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM-1220, the Gazette Radio Hour, and we'll be right back.
I need to know, if you think you're gonna leave, then you better say so. I need to know, because I don't know how long I can hold on, if you're making me wait.
We are back, everybody, on Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM-1220 KHTS. It's the Gazette Radio Hour with Doug and John. Chris Burke sitting in for John. It's the radio digest version of the Santa Clarita Gazette and free classifieds are all you need to know to be in the know or something like that. I usually screw it up.
No, that was right.
Okay, and we're talking to Mr. Chris Janice from the Gale and Rice Company. Chris, during the break, it dawned on us some of our listeners might not have gotten exactly what you do. So if you could briefly explain to the folks what you do.
Sure. So we are really the conduit between corporations or individuals who want to procure and produce big name entertainment and the evils of the agency world.
Is he talking about you?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. So we're the ones that will actually take their calls versus the agents that don't take quite as many calls of kind of individuals who might be calling in to buy one thing one time. So we're the ones that can give them, pricing, availability, the ins and outs, the good and bad about all artists across all the spectrum, as well as knowing that particular client's situation, where are they going to do the show, certain cities are more expensive than others, those type of things. We can roll all those costs up for them and kind of package it all together instead of them tracking down all of that themselves, agents or production or venues or things like that.
Okay, so when the Santa Clarita Gazette gets really, really big,
yes,
and I want Tom Petty to play at my year-end party, I call you?
Yeah, that's your best bet. In my humble opinion, that's exactly what you should do.
Okay, and then you would be the guy that would set it all up, negotiate with Tom Petty's representation.
That would
Correct.
be me.
And that would be Chris.
And that would be Chris, correct. And so what we're able to do, though, is give you some exposure to the entire thing before you commit to it. So Tom Petty is one part of the cost, certainly, but there's a whole lot of other things that go into it. So we're able to give you a snapshot of the overall, not just cost, but just the impact. This is how much time you need. This is the kind of venue you need. This is, all the things that go into what I think people don't necessarily realize when they go see a concert, or at least it's not top of mind, is the things that go into it, especially in these private situations where they're going into very kind of not less than normal venues most of the time.
So let's stay on Tom Petty for a second, because Chris and I did work. He did produce one of my clients, Tom Petty, and it was for a wedding, and it was a private individual, obviously, up in Seattle. And when he talks about more than just what the show and getting the artist, and this was a very non-traditional venue. There's a private jet involved. There's everything over and above the price of the artist. So, the quote that I give that I give him, he knows that it's going to cost a lot more than that, and that's why it's important that he's involved. So, Chris, we talked about some of your clients. Okay, we've talked a lot about my clients. Let's talk about some of your clients. Who have you worked with? Who can you tell us on the radio? Give us some juicy information here.
A lot of them don't especially want to be named. A common one.
But we don't care.
I know you don't care. A common one that you and I have worked on together, Chris, obviously this, is George Lucas and his wife. We've done a ton of work for over the years. Really just incredible people and throw really good parties, in my opinion.
Which means they spend a lot of money.
Yeah, well, listen, you say it your way, I say it mine. And so many of them are oddly not. The actual clients are not necessarily recognizable names. They're high-end individuals from corporations that have done very well over time. The Tom Petty one you speak of was a very high-ranking executive at Amazon. Previously Microsoft. Before that, I've done stuff over the years. Not so much in recent years, but for many, many years, I did a lot for Bill Gates and both private and corporate stuff for him. So It's an interesting range of people for sure. And again, they use the word private dates for a reason. A lot of them prefer not to be known.
So, Chris, the first time I got to know Chris Burke and he told me what he did, my first thought for an artist was, would he want, and maybe this is what you're alluding to, does he want the public to know?
Right.
Or do they do this type of shows? Are they worried that their fan base will look down on them for doing stuff like this?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris probably has a little more exposure to that because he deals with the artist on their decisions on whether they want to do private dates. But I will say there's a perception out there that it's, there are some that hold out that say, I'll never do them. I don't want to do them because they can still sell 30,000 seats to people that wanted to see them and paid money to see them. That's, in their mind, a much different kind of audience than a private date. But on the whole, yes, I think they prefer not to let it be known. I don't think it's something they publicize. These dates pay much better than a public date pays. So, to some extent, it's the arc of someone's career. You may have some set of years where you can turn them down, and then eventually you find yourself in a position that you'd like to start considering them again.
And I got to say, I think over the years, Chris, and I know you've seen it, artists are much more accepting of these type of events. They weren't 15, 20 years ago. They kind of they equivalated it to being in Vegas. It was the end of their career. They're kind of selling out. But I don't think many artists see it that way. We've had major rock acts from, the Foo Fighters on up and down, either way, just doing these type of events. And like Chris says, they get paid well for it, and 90% of the time, nobody knows they're doing them. So, what...
Well, and what tends to happen is the agency gets them primed to do it. We're going to take care of you. We'll put you with a producer that knows what they're doing. They create a protective, and this is what Chris started and all the other agencies have followed. They create a special department that ensures that protection for them. So they no longer walk into these melees of, the Iowa Bankers Association that decided to throw a concert and got their buddy, Joe to produce it for them. Which I think is where it might have started years ago. But it's a very well-run, high-end form of work now that it didn't used to be.
Now, one of my questions is because do they know going in sometimes that the audience might not be completely receptive to them? I heard a friend of mine works for Ford, and he went to a big a party in a park here in L.A., and Toby Keith was playing, and 75% of the people there didn't care and were talking, and it was very embarrassing, my friend thought.
Well, I will tell a very, very fast story, but Chris and I go way back, and many years ago, and he's unfortunately passed away now, but I was producing an Eddie Rabbit show, which will tell you how long ago this was, and we're standing there, and Chris looks at me in the middle of this melee, like literally a melee, that nobody's paying attention, nobody is listening, and he turned to me and said, "Did I know that none of these people were going to be seated for the show?" And I said, "Did I, forget to mention that to you?" But that's a very good representation of, yes, what happened. And, I think at this point they do know that it's a different kind of audience, an audience that doesn't, didn't pay to come see him is really the best way to look at it. So they can kind of, behave however they want to. On the whole, though, really doesn't happen that often. I mean, the audiences are great, respectful, and get into the music.
But a lot of these higher-end audiences have seen everybody, they've heard everybody, so something that you and I might think is incredibly special,
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, unfortunately, we're out of time. We've been talking to Chris Janice of the Gale and Rice Company. We really appreciate you coming on. Very insightful, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. I know you were busy today, and you had to go out of your way for this, so I do appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. This is the Gazette Radio Hour on Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM-1220 KHTS, and we'll be right back.